Hi, everyone. I have with me today Jesse Robertson live from Minnesota. So, first thing in the morning for Jesse and afternoon Friday for me. So, winding down. Why have I got Jesse here? Okay, Jesse has a wonderful Instagram page I love. It's called Husbands for Menopause, and that's the number four.
Right.
Amazing. And he does all these little reels and short videos to educate men, and you've got a free download for men, etc. And I love this because I think there's a lot of men out there who care. They want to support, they want to learn, and they feel a bit left out. They feel there's nothing for them. So that's why I wanted to talk to you today. And I have shared, people know I'm doing the video with you, and I've shared some of your reels so they know who you are, but look them up if you don't. What else was I going to say there? So your free download, Jesse, is it being utilized? Are you out the door with downloads?
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Gosh, I'd think it might be over 1,000.
Excellent.
Um, yeah, which is amazing. And it's funny because you look at the email address and you try to figure out if it's a man or a woman that's doing the download. Because it is
Yes.
a free download for husbands. But the reality is there's a lot of women that are following my channel, and which is
Giving it to their
amazing.
husband or their
And they're
partner.
giving it
Yeah.
to their exactly. And so the advocacy that I've experienced from women on my Instagram channel and my TikTok channel, which is by the same name, which is quite a bit bigger than my Instagram channel.
That's
It
right.
just it just started first. My Instagram channel is kind of young. I think I just started in August. But my TikTok channel, I started when I started this whole conversation around menopause. I started back in February. So and it's been amazing to see the advocacy that women have offered to try to get my message out to their husbands or to men. So I think a lot of women are downloading the free download for husbands and then sending it right
Or
to
giving it with
men,
their
to their
dinner,
husbands.
whether they like it or
Um,
not.
yeah, exactly. Here you go. Listen to this or read this. But
That's
the
amazing.
truth is, a lot of women are sending. They'll comment and they'll say they're sending my videos to their husbands, or they'll say that they are sitting down. One of my favorites is a woman wrote me and she said, "Every time I see one of your videos, I sit down with my husband and we watch it together," which was awesome.
Amazing.
Yes.
Jesse, I'm aware I had actually discovered you before it happened, but I'm aware you went viral. It was one of your TikTok videos, yeah? And you were on USA Today, is that correct?
Yeah,
And
it's
so
been
I think I saw that around the same time I had emailed you. I was like, oh, wow, and you deserve to have gone viral. What made you do this? Like, what made you say, I'm going on Instagram and I'm gonna, have fun?
well, I it was very unexpected. I actually started in, gosh, I believe I started a channel. If you want the full story, I started the channel in February of 2025,
Okay.
and the channel was originally about parenting. I knew nothing about menopause. Menopause was not on my mind whatsoever, which I've come to obviously find is a completely, frightening and crazy reality for men that we don't know about this, that we're not talking about this. I'm 48 years old. I've been married 18 years. I mean, how do I not know about menopause? But we'll get into that. All right. So the in February, I started this TikTok channel that was about parenting, and it was probably 4 weeks in. The channel had a few hundred followers or something like that. And I was driving home from work and I was listening to a favorite podcast of mine, which is the Dax Shepard podcast. And I was listening, so it's Armchair Expert. And I'm listening to this podcast, and Dr. Mary Claire Haver is the guest. And
Brilliant.
Dr. Haver, of course, right? So Dr. Haver was the guest. I did not know who Dr. Haver was, nor could I have told you the first thing about menopause. But just driving along, started listening, and in the first 5 minutes, I was completely just blown away by what she was saying, and I'm sure that there were hundreds of thousands of other men that listened to that podcast and just didn't really think anything of it or maybe breezed by, but something for me was different. I don't really know how to describe it. I've actually been kind of trying to figure that out. Like what light bulb went off, what just kind of blew up in my mind about this, but it was very short amount of time that she was talking and I was fixated to every word she was saying. I was thinking about my wife, I was thinking about my daughter when she started talking about, what the present day experience is for women in menopause, and my daughter's 14, so I'm thinking what's this going to be like for her in, 15, 20 years. Um, and I went home and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And the next day I got on my little TikTok channel and I very sort of, sheepishly, I grabbed my phone as I do, right? And I was just like, do women want their husbands to talk to them about menopause? And I was just
Yeah.
thinking, this is going to be the end of me on TikTok. And, but it was the exact opposite. Women came back. Obviously the video itself got a couple 100,000 views. Nothing that I had seen before. Comments were just absolutely, please, talk about this, support us. We're not getting the help that we need. Our husbands don't know about this, and all the things that we now know to be true. And I mean, from there, it just became all I wanted to talk about. I started researching, I started reading, I started listening. I read Dr. Haver's book. I've just consumed as much information as I can. And then what's cool is over time, my TikTok channel in particular, right? Because it's older than my Instagram channel, it has, I think, 120,000 comments.
Wow.
And it's a library of
Good.
data from women about their experiences and their symptoms and their thoughts and their feelings and their fears and their thoughts on men and husbands. And there's husbands in there too, right?
Great.
Talking about the same thing. And that has become really, as much as anything else, a main source of information, right? If I post and then women say, I wish my husband understood this, well, then I'll learn about that and then I'll post that to husbands,
Amazing.
right? Because I'm in my channels, I'm not actually talking to women, I'm talking to men, but
Great.
women are listening, which
Yeah.
is amazing.
And there is, unintentional divide, and we're still stuck in that menopause is something to hide or to be ashamed of. And
Sure.
look, I do think we are the generation of change. What I'm intrigued by, you obviously have a curious mind as to why. I was you going, what the hell is this? Why didn't I know about this? When you were listening to this, what rung a bell? You don't need to discuss your personal life, but were you listening going, oh my goodness, this is my wife? Or were you listening saying, oh my goodness, why do I not know this? This is not fair. Which was it? Or both?
It was more not fair
Yeah,
because I have seen some things in my wife, but she wasn't struggling with significant symptoms,
yeah,
right? I
good.
started to understand, oh, when I roll over in the middle of the night and she doesn't have any covers on and I'm bundled up, what's that all about, right? Well, she's hot. She's having trouble regulating her temperature. So I started to realize things like that, emotions that my wife was dealing with that seemed uncharacteristic, I think. I started to understand a little bit more about that. And she and I have since been able to have conversations about those things. But what I think really struck me was when Dr. Haver started talking about how doctors are not trained to support women in this. How women were not prepared for this. Nobody talked to them about it. 1 billion women on the planet are going through this, and none
Mhm.
of them we're ready for this. And then when they go through it, they go to a doctor and they get gaslit. They get told that they're getting old. They need to have a glass of wine. And as I was listening to that, what I think is interesting is anybody who's been paying attention over, I guess, the last decade or two, maybe, certainly the last decade, has been seeing how all of these injustices towards women, right? Like the Me Too movement coming
Yeah.
out and what's going on in Hollywood and what was happening. I think anybody who's been paying attention, you're starting to as a man, I
Mhm.
am starting to learn more about what it's like to be a woman. I've been learning that, right? Any man who's been paying attention has started to realize like there is so much about life that is so much more difficult for women. And it's in the workplace and it's the unfairness in politics, it's the unfairness in medicine, it's the unfair, so I was starting to pay attention to all of that and clocking that. And I think when this podcast came out, and I then, on top of everything else I had already started to understand, I hear this, like on top of everything else of what it's like to be a woman, she also has to go through all of these symptoms and doesn't have any support and wasn't prepared for it and is being judged and blamed for her behavior. Like, it was one of those things where I was like, what's next? I mean, it's,
I
it's,
think this might be the last taboo, as many people
I
have
hope
said.
so.
Like, it can't be anything else. It can't get worse.
I mean, well, within menopause, I was every time I learn about a symptom, I go, okay, that's it. That, can't be worse than frozen shoulder. And then I learn about the next thing, right? And then I learn about the next thing. And it started, I started probably like any other man, thinking, okay, hot flashes, got it. Mood swings, sure. But as I started to learn more about menopause, I started to learn more about the mental challenges, right?
Mental
The
health,
not just
yeah.
the anxiety and depression, right? Because this has all sort of happened to me as I've been learning in these little chunks and phases. And when I
Yeah.
got into anxiety and depression, that those are things I've experienced. So that was something that started to really hit home. And I was thinking about that on top of the physical symptoms that I was learning about, right? And then I learned about, from Dr. Haver, I learned about weight gain due to estrogen loss, but then not just rate gain, like calories in, calories out weight gain, like subcutaneous fat weight gain, but visceral
Right.
fat weight gain. And I'm just like, really? Even the weight gain isn't fair? You know what I mean? Like, it's
You
just,
don't work in healthcare. Sure you
I
do.
do, I know, everything that I know about this has been self-taught or,
Same as
I mean,
myself, and it's
yeah,
just such a rabbit hole. And I'm what 8, 9 years, and I'm still learning every day. Like it's just
yeah,
the greatest. It's justice. It's mental. Um,
absolutely.
there are lots of men like you. They might not be on social media. I would like anything. I don't want to say anything about men versus women. There's people who are interested and people who aren't, and people who are passionate and people who aren't. But it's
Sure.
just so refreshing. And I do love your little videos. They're short, they're sweet, they're to the point to make you laugh, because a lot of people, I think men as well, they don't want to sit for an hour, do they, listening to something? But you're just,
Yeah.
with your paper, your prompts and stuff, get the point across. Are
Yep.
there many people in the United States doing menopause stuff, males? No.
No, I think the United States is behind on this
Yeah.
with respect to politics, to the workplace, but also to just activity on social media. I mean, what I find is, are there males talking about it? Yes. But I see it in two ways so far. One is he's a doctor, right? So he's talking about it from that standpoint. Um, and some of those folks are, have a lot of followers, and that's great. Because some men may want to. Well, actually, to be honest with you, I think more women are probably learning from a male doctor who's getting on social media and saying, I'm a doctor, right?
Yeah.
I'm a board certified OBGYN or something like that. So that's why you should listen to me. And as a woman, no different than I would listen to a female doctor. I'm sure women are listening to male doctors, right? Uh, what is different about what I'm doing and is I'm not a medical professional. What I am is a husband who loves and cares about his wife and thinks that this is totally unacceptable that she's going through this.
What do
And
you
there,
think, Jesse? Does she say, no, oh my goodness, you're mad? Or is she totally like you're in
well,
the bed beside her reading about menopause and she's not?
so what's funny is she's been incredibly supportive. But she also thinks some of this is, well, I'll give you an example. So here's the story. I walked into early on. I think I had maybe just taken in the podcast, right? And from with Dr. Haver, and I come into the kitchen, and I'll remember this forever. I come into the kitchen and I go, honey, did you know that doctors were not trained to support women on menopause? And she gives me this look like, welcome, welcome to the club, right? Like we've all known this for a long time, right? We women, right? Me, my friends, right? Like
Yeah.
we get it, but it's adorable that you now are starting to learn about it, right? And I think she, because nothing had happened with my social
Yeah.
media, my channel, so at the time I think she just thought it was sweet, right? Like, oh, that's nice that
Oh,
you're learning a thing or two, right? Or you're aware of something, right? Um, Over time, of course, now that it's become bigger and the message has become wider, I think now she's really excited.
oh,
She just like, she's like, oh my gosh, like I think this is actually making a difference. I think people are hearing what you're saying. I think you're reaching men in a way that they haven't really connected to before.
and you
And
are.
so and now she's very supportive, so it's great.
That's amazing. And you are. What do you think, Jesse? Do you think men are embarrassed by the subject? Do you think they're still that, oh, that's a woman's thing, I don't want to know, I'll go and play golf? What do you think is going on here that there's such a lack for the men? What do you think?
To be honest, I think it's possible that the lack of education and understanding from doctors that women have because they weren't prepared for this.
Hmm.
If you think about where is a man going to learn about this?
Yeah.
It's probably from his wife. Like it's pro, it's pro. Like I had no idea about this. There was no outlet where I was learning about it, but my wife wasn't talking to me
Well,
about what
she
she was
knows.
going through. No, she was not. She was not. She was not sharing. Menopause never once came out of her mouth,
You know
and
why? Just out of interest, do you know why it didn't? Did she not want to talk to anyone, or did she feel it wasn't right to speak to her husband, or did she just think he wouldn't understand?
I think she thought he wouldn't understand. And I think that that's what's interesting about that is a woman who thinks that her husband wouldn't understand isn't saying that he doesn't care.
Mm.
She's just saying it's not his world. He's not, you know what I mean? He's not going to be able to get his head around things like estrogen and progesterone. And, he's not going to be able to get his head around some of these symptoms I'm dealing with or understanding. Or if I even say something like, and this is true for me, if this happened to me just literally a couple of months ago, I think. I was very aware of hot flashes, very aware of cortisol spikes, very aware of estrogen drop, very aware of all of these things that
Mm.
I've learned about. What I didn't realize was I thought hot flashes were just at night because that's all that
And they can be
people,
cold flashes too. We call them flushes, you call them flashes. They can be
yeah.
cold as well. They can be basically your thermostat blows up.
And they can happen in really terrible moments, right? Where it could be a job interview, it could
Mhm.
be you're talking, you could be, a bridesmaid giving a maid of honor giving the
Yeah.
wedding speech, right? Like you could be the bride being,
Yeah.
it could happen anywhere, right? And
And it
so
might floor
I
you. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that became another one of those things where I was like, "Oh my gosh," right? But I think my mission has always been not just that I want to educate husbands about menopause so that they can better support their wives. Um, but also I want husbands to understand that I think similar to all of these movements, right? Husbands need to understand the context in which menopause, I think, is happening, right? Because I don't think it's enough to just tell husbands, so here's this symptom, and that's what it is, and here's that symptom, and that's what that is, and here's this symptom, right? It's about, think about when this is happening in her life. Think about what's going on in her life outside of menopause, right? We're talking about maybe it's happening way sooner than she expected. It could be a hysterectomy in her 20s. It could be
Yeah.
perimenopause in her 30s. She's still trying to like go out and have fun at the bar and meet men. And now she's going through, this stuff,
Mm.
right? So that's a thing. But then if you look into the later parts, I've always been sort of interested in this 6 year period that I look at, and that's basically from 44 to 50. And if you look at what's happening for a woman, at least in the stats I was looking at in the US between 44 and 50, perimenopause on the average would have begun around 40. We all know it starts sooner than that for some
Yeah.
women, but on the average. And then for from 40 to 44, she's dealing with all of these symptoms, right? But at 44, by salary in the US, she is at the peak of her career, statistically. So, in the 4 years leading up to the peak of her career, she's dealing with all of these symptoms. Then at 44, she is between 44 and 50, she is likely raising, not only at the peak of her career, not only dealing with these symptoms, but likely raising teenage kids. And then by the time she gets to 50, one of those kids has probably left the nest, maybe both. Like the average empty nester age, I think, is 49,
Hmm.
right? So then you get to 50, and I think it's either 50 or 51, but I think it's 50. I saw a statistic that said uh, a woman will likely have lost one of her parents. So
The
think
sandwich
about
generation. Do you use that term in America?
The which generation?
The sandwich generation,
Yes,
sandwich.
absolutely. Yes.
And
And
it's
exactly right.
women are getting labeled being in the sandwich generation. And although they are caught, it's menopause. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible, incredibly difficult. And it's something that I'm really passionate about some of the feedback I've gotten from men oh, and women, of course, but men who are literally saying, quite honestly, like I used to be a total jerk to my wife until I started seeing your content. There's men who say, sadly, there's men who say, I wish I had seen your content sooner, but now it's too late. Um,
Yes, we hear a lot of that.
mhm.
Yeah, that type of thing, because, the stats on marriage breakups are significant and they deserve to be looked at a certain age. And I
Yeah,
don't believe it's just as simple as they've nothing in common, the kids have left home. I don't believe that. These
right.
people were a unit, they made life together. Why? Anyway, it's not for you or I to say why marriages aren't working out. I actually had a load of questions submitted for you, and as I'm talking, Jesse, you've probably answered a lot of them already. You're being very thorough. Thank you.
Hmm.
There's a couple of questions that I want to ask you. The first one is, it's probably a bit covered. What do you wish you had known before this about menopause? Yeah. Would you have liked to have known about perimenopause and menopause as you got married, for example? Would you have liked to have known it, or would you say, "Oh God, I'm not doing this"?
That's a great question. The answer is absolutely yes. But what I think is interesting is, I got married at 30.
Okay.
I don't know what my 30-year-old self would have thought about all of
Yes,
this.
it's
Like that's
like your brain is
18.
different.
Yeah, that's 18 years ago. So as a man, it's possible. And I'm just like anybody else, right? I've changed a lot. I have a therapist that I love to see, and I've learned a lot about myself and life. And I don't know that my 30-year-old self would have
Wanted to
probably,
know.
yeah, or maybe, certainly my 48-year-old self would like my 30-year-old self to have known this. My 30-year-old self may not have been much different than most guys, and the what's interesting too is women who see my content who haven't experienced any of this because maybe they're in their early 30s or the demographics on my channel are about there,
Mm.
start about there. Um, some of them will write, "I'm afraid. I'm afraid of this."
That's
Like,
the
you know,
problem. We want to educate everyone, but then like younger women say, I don't know, I'm scared.
yeah.
But I suppose it's like anything new, like menopause is new, but it's only now we're talking about it. It's like anything. I mean, I don't know if you remember a time, I do, here in Ireland, where you couldn't even talk about a period. Like,
Mm,
it was all
yeah,
private.
sure.
Um, yeah, and you've got a point there. Like, I don't know, would my 25-year-old self would have wanted to know this? I was too busy enjoying life. I said, go away,
Yeah,
I'll deal with it when I'm old.
right. Right.
I suppose that's a good answer. Like, you can't say that. You don't know what your 30-year-old self would have wanted. Another question is being asked, and it's very sensitive and very personal for women, but it's a very common question. Women do not know how to approach the whole intimacy thing, and the vaginal problems women get. I know that's personal. I suppose they're looking for tips from a man. What should they be saying and doing? Because most men think she doesn't love me anymore. She must have someone else. But
Mm.
women might be afraid to say, look, it's painful or whatever. Like, what should she be saying?
In part, I think it's about how it's said.
Okay.
The what is the easy part because the what is simply what's happening. I've got dry vagina. Sex feels like I've got razor blades in my vagina. I don't feel like I want to have sex anymore because of, loss
Mm,
of estrogen and testosterone, my libido, and my,
mm.
these are all the what's. What I like to think about when it comes to what I would consider this to be a crucial conversation, which is a book. There's actually a book I've read called Crucial Conversations, and then there's another source. Have you ever heard of Simon Sinek?
I've heard the name, but that's it. Go on.
So Simon Sinek talks about how to have difficult conversations in life and in the workplace, and
Okay.
he shared with me a tactic. Well, he shared with the world on his socials, but I felt like he was personally talking to me, but he talked about a tactic called FBI, which stands for Feeling Behavior Impact.
Okay.
And it really stood out to me because it's easier to argue with a what, it's harder to argue with a feeling. So so the way I would describe this, and it can go both ways, right, is a woman could sit down and say, when you judge me or when you get mad, let's not use terms like judge, but let's just say when you get upset that I don't want to have sex, right? It makes me feel like you don't love me anymore.
Okay.
And my concern is if that continues, that's the behavior part, right? So FB, if that continues, I'm not going to be able to trust you. Um, I don't know if our, relationship will continue to work. I don't know, it could be any number of consequences, right?
Okay.
But it's feeling behavior impact. It's this is what your behavior, talking to the man, this is how it's making me feel because of what I'm going through. And my concern is if that continues, if we continue to work this way or communicate this way, the impact is going to be our relationship isn't going to make it, right? Or something less dramatic. It could be, I'm just not going to feel like I can talk to you about these things. Um, it's a different approach. It could go the other way too. So as a man, when you don't want to have sex with me, it makes me feel like you don't want to be with me anymore. Right. And if that continues, I'm wondering what are we, what's going to happen with us? It opens up this sense of I want to talk to you about how I feel about what's going on, not talk to you about what is going on. And the conversation then becomes about the feelings, the impact that it has on each other. And that in that conversation, then the what comes out, right? Well, I understand that you feel that way. Let me tell you why this is happening. So that's but if I just start with this is what's happening, right? It can become defensive or argumentative.
Okay.
Um, so that is because if you look at it from the standpoint of let's say a woman sits down with her husband in the kitchen and says, honey, I need to talk to you about my dry vagina. Like
Okay. It's not the usual over dinner, though, is it?
no, not really. And I think a man is going to sit there and be like, "What? Like, why are we talking?" You know what I mean? Like, if you don't link to the why, right? If you don't start with why this is like why this matters, why you should care.
Hmm.
Okay, that could be my feelings. That could be the impact. That could, it could be, she could sit down and say, "I know you've been frustrated that we haven't been intimate for a while." Let me tell you what's going on.
Yes.
And when you get upset with me because we haven't been intimate, it makes me feel like you don't love me anymore.
Yes.
And then stop talking and let the man respond, right? And then even if he starts to say, "Well, I think this is BS and blah 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 blah," and she can then repeat herself and say, "When you talk to me that way, it makes me feel like you don't want to be with me, right? Or you don't care about me, or you don't, care about this, or what." So again, it's just trying to bring the feelings and the why into the conversation and not just focusing on symptom,
Hmm.
cause, effect, that sort of
Okay.
thing.
And
It's
that's,
complicated.
yeah, of course it is. And that's a good way of expressing, the answer to the question. And I think what you've said covers a lot. Like another question is, how do I explain my behavior to my husband? He doesn't understand that I've become, mood swings. Like,
Yep.
I love you 1 minute and then you come back in the door and I throw a cup at you. So, how can women, they want to know, how can they explain that for a man to understand? Because men don't have fluctuations of hormones like us. So
Right.
I think even if you explain, look, it's my hormones, blah, the man is probably thinking, what is she talking about? Because you can't relate.
It sounds like an excuse.
Does it?
right?
Thank you.
It,
So
it,
what
it
should we
sounds like
do?
an excuse. So it's number one is don't try to explain it while it's happening, right? Hey, come back later
Okay.
and say, hey, I want to talk to you about yesterday,
Mm,
right? I want to talk to you about an hour ago. What,
okay.
whenever, I think for me, I've connected to this in a couple of different ways, or I found that I've connected with husbands in a couple of different ways.
Okay.
One is scientifically. Just I'm going to talk. Estrogen is a real thing.
Yeah.
There's estrogen receptors all over the body. Estrogen affects the area of the brain that regulates mood. So when I lose estrogen, it is affecting an area of my brain, which is decision making, it's focus, it's stress response. These are things that, I'll tell you I'm trying, but this is what's happening to me is actually a natural phase of life that's out of my control. And I want you to understand that I realize that you're also going through this too. That you're seeing what I'm going through, and some of what I'm going through is affecting you as well. And I want to help you understand what's going on. Slide over my download, watch some videos,
Yeah.
right? Like that's where you could insert if you wanted to. You could, as a woman, and this is something that I know women are doing because they tell me they're doing it. You could stop there and say, you know what? Do me if would you be willing to watch this 60-second post? Would you be willing to go on this guy's channel and watch 5 minutes of posts?
Mm,
Pick any post you want. And then just at least that initial sort of here's what's going on with her could come from me instead of her. And that is what seems to be connecting with men, right? Because men sometimes just husbands just don't want to be educated about things from their
yeah.
wife, right? Some men are like that. Another way in which women can connect with their husband on this stuff is to say, well, one thing that I've used is, which sounds odd, but it worked, is to say, hey, let's say I'm a woman talking to my husband. I could say something like, think of my body like your car. Okay, your car
Okay.
has
And they
oil in
relate
it.
to cars. Go on.
Yeah. And your car has oil in it, right? And when that oil runs low, right? That car doesn't run, it still runs, but it just doesn't run as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
My oil is running low. Estrogen actually is a natural lubricant in the body, so it's kind of like oil. And because it's a natural lubricant in the body and it's kind of like oil, it's like that's why my shoulder hurts because I don't have that because it's inflamed. That's why, sex hurts because I don't have that lubrication. It's literally the same thing as what oil does for your engine in your car. This is just the natural oil. And the problem is you can take your car in and replace it, and my is going away forever, right? Now, and of course, then you could broach the conversation around HRT, right? And that sort of thing. And that's kind of a whole nother thing where husbands, unfortunately, I think not understanding certain things, what they'll do is they will just tell their wives, well, go take HRT. It's like they read it on a billboard on the freeway or something. Like, it's just like go take HRT. That's what you're supposed to do. Stop complaining about this. Just go get that HRT stuff.
Oh, and that's
Well,
not nice. That's not nice.
but listen, we all know that HRT helps many women,
Mm, yeah.
but not all women qualify for it for a variety of reasons. It also can be expensive, or there can be insurance issues with it. So I mean, it's not as simple as to just tell people to do that. I certainly, tell husbands as much as I can. That's not for you to tell her anyway, right? So that's a conversation between her and her doctor. That's a choice for her to make. If you'd like to educate yourself about the realities, or about HRT and what that means and what it does, then go do that and then have a conversation with her, but don't tell her to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very hard. It's hard for both parties. Obviously, as the woman experience it, but I think everyone's affected by menopause. The kids, the dogs, the cat, might get the husband, the partner, but it is, and it's not nice. So I think when you understand something, it's much easier to deal with. So
Yeah.
you're in the lucky position now that I don't know what's happening in your home, and that's your own business. But if your wife is having mood issues, you understand. It's making it so much easier for you. For you, you're not, going off to the bar with your mates and saying she doesn't love me anymore. She's after shouting at me. You get it.
Yes. And
You
and I
get it
can do
because of
things.
education.
And it allows me to I get it because of education, and it allows me to do something about it. So that's what's actually cool is as a husband, you don't it's not just something that you have to, let's say understand better and then sit back and watch the show. You can get involved. There are,
Yeah.
if you understand things like mental load, if you understand things like what your wife is carrying, what she's dealing with, not just the symptoms of menopause, but everything else that's going on with the kids, with appointments, with the parents, with work. It can be as simple as, hey, I'm at the grocery store. Do you need anything? It can be as simple as the dishes are piling up, so do them. Right? You know how your laundry machine works, so do it. You need a couple new shirts, go buy them. Like you can do all of these things that she doesn't have to do, right? That she's probably been doing by and
Well,
large.
Jesse, I know this is going to be a very popular video, and I know there's women watching this thinking, can we clone him? Can we?
I think there are a lot of I really do believe this. There are a lot more men out there that are like
I
me that
agree. Yeah.
that
And
would want to would want to support their wives. They just don't understand, and that's what I'm trying to
yeah.
solve.
And there probably is even more on social media. I'm not saying that you're the only man, but I admire your what you're doing is admirable. I love your videos. I love the style you have. And I was so happy when I saw you went viral. So I think we leave it at that. This is so helpful. I have a feeling that everyone has begun to send this to their husbands. And thank you so much. I'll stop recording.
Absolutely.